Welcome to The Freight Break with your host, Dan Lindsey, the podcast that cuts through the noise of the trucking industry. We're talking real conversations, real relationships, and real insight that keep the wheels turning.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome back to this week's episode of The Freight Break, your go-to podcast for all things valuable and profitable in the freight industry, flagship podcast of the Broker Carrier Summit and the BCS Freight Network. I am your host, Dan Lindsey, and today I have the opportunity to break down freight fraud and how it's impacting the industry with my good friend Michael Caney from Highway. Before we do that, though, let's kick it over to TIE Software.
Meet TIE Software's workflow automation, built to help LTL and FTL freight brokers boost productivity. Use custom prompts to automate repetitive tasks like status updates, carrier changes, and shipment alerts right in the platform. Manage operations with automated scheduling, carrier management, and real-time updates. Workflow automation removes bottlenecks, freeing you up to grow your business. Best of all, it's easy to set up and use. No coding or tech skills required. Choose your workflows and TIE does the rest. Book a demo today and see how TIE makes efficiency happen.
The Broker Carrier Summit is taking over Orlando, Florida, the 28th of October through 30th. Join the best in the biz for 3 days of networking, education, and real talk with the top minds in logistics. If you're serious about growing your business, this is the event for you. Lock in your spot now at brokercarriersummit.com or bcsfreightnetwork.com, where the future of freight takes shape.
All right, everyone, welcome back to this episode of Breaking It Down. Today, we're going to be breaking down the very hot topic of freight fraud with my good friend, Mike Caney, CCO of Highway. Mike, how are you doing, my friend?
Man, I'm good. Good to talk to you.
You too, man. It's been a while. Like the last time I saw you was before BCS in Indy. It was actually, we were at TIA together.
Yeah, I think it's probably when we were on a panel.
Yeah, we were talking. It was talking about building a quality carrier network.
Yeah. I haven't seen you. How have things been for you? You been good?
Good, busy. Things have been going, absolutely crazy over here. We're spinning a lot of things up. We have a lot of big announcements coming up in the next few weeks. So I'm excited, and we're gearing up for Orlando. So Orlando's going to be our biggest and best summit yet, and I'm excited to see you guys there too.
Yeah, man, we're excited. We're excited to take part. I really appreciate like the flavor of the audience that you've built and the topics that you cover. I think it's important. I think it's an important. I think before BCS, everything had very separate threads. It was broker focused or carrier focused, and I think you've done a really good job of bringing some important conversations to the surface. And if nothing else, just saying, hey, can we talk? I just took 20-second time. Can we talk? Can we just like talk like human beings? Rather than like kind of these like categorical narratives, are we other people? All carriers are this, or all brokers are this. And so I'm really grateful for the work you do, man.
I appreciate that, man, and the team appreciates that as well. Yeah, and one of the things that we really are excited about in those conversations is not only the conversations themselves, but who is having them. I talked to probably 30 or 40 people at BCS in Indy who told me this was their first show ever, their first event, first conference, first anything. Like we're tapping into a segment of the market that does not do the trade show circuit. And one of the reasons for that, specifically when it comes to carriers, because they don't feel heard. They're kind of treated as filler. And so they're really excited to get a chance to come to the BCS and actually share their story. So
and I've not done a ton of carrier shows, but when you think about the few that I've been to, right, it's a lot of peddling, like vendors just trying to sell something. This ELD or this thing for drivers or this thing for equipment. And those things are necessary, by the way. Like, take nothing away from vendors that need to sell things to improve the efficiency of fleets and the betterment of drivers. But when it really comes to like, hey, how do you think about running a small business, which is the majority of fleets in North America? Or like you go to like a TCA events and benchmarking events, they're all finance driven, right? They're all efficiency driven, like yield driven, very kind of metric driven things, or product driven. And I think what you're doing that's so valuable is bridging the gap of like, hey, what is it really like to run a small business as a small motor carrier, which is the majority of fleets in North America. And so if you're a motor carrier, like, how do you do that better? How do you think of yourself like a business owner? Because that's what you are. And if you're a freight broker, like, how do you really think about empowering small business owners, not just finding a truck, right? Not just managing a small fleet, but like, this is a business owner, right? So how do you help this business owner run his business better? And I think those are so important.
Right. When you guys have been a part of it since, I think it was since the Tampa Summit, when you guys first came. And one of the reasons why I'm excited about companies, not just the brokers and the carriers, but the sponsors that we have and the vendors as well, is we specifically curate who can sponsor the BCS. Right. It would be super easy for us to go out to every single company that's carrier facing, whether it's you mentioned, whether it's an ELD or whatever it might be, or a truck maintenance shop or something like that. But we specifically focus on companies that have some level of broker carrier interaction. They're the intermediaries to the intermediaries, right? So when it comes to what you guys do and with the service the highway performs, you are very broker facing because that's your customer base, but you also interact with the carriers. So talk to us about how your strategy has been built over the years when it comes to carrier outreach, and how that's kind of changed.
Oh man, that's a really good question. It is ever changing, and it's changing now dramatically. You're right. Dan, our core customer is the broker. That's who pays the bill, because it's their network we're protecting. It's we're selling them solutions to improve their business. We don't sell to shippers, and we don't monetize the carrier today. So the initial carrier outreach was, there was when highway first started growing rapidly, it was this very like meeting a felt need, my things are getting stolen. I need them to not be stolen. Right. That was like, hey, just like
basic 101.
Yeah. Just like, can we just not have things stolen? And so, the whole initial thing was like, well, how do we do that? And you have to get carriers to operate more transparently. And so the initial carrier outreach was like, look, this is the new world. You got to do this because brokers, they don't know who you are. The kind of the wink, wink. If you had an MC number and an insurance certificate, the way that you and I came up in the business, like it really wasn't that bad for a long time, Dan. For the most part, carriers are pretty trustworthy. I mean, they really were. It was a great, yeah, they really were.
I mean, you had the ones that obviously were the fraud rings.
Yeah. And they would do silly things, or they would double broker.
Right. And everybody knew who they were. Yeah. That was the thing.
Yeah. And you had your $4 a mile DAT rats in certain area codes, and you just knew what you were working with, right? Like if you were going to Chicago to New Jersey, like you knew who you were working with. But as it evolved, it just became like, we got to know, we got to tell the truth. Like and so it was like, we're not here to be your friend. We're here to protect freight. And so now that's evolved over time, because what's changed over time is, man, we cast a really big net, and we don't apologize for overreaching on security, which means sometimes we have to sift through and see like, okay, who are the really good owner operators that just kind of got caught in some things, right? How do we help them understand like, hey, and if you're going to use virtual addresses and you're going to do things, like you're going to look like people that do bad things, how can we help you not look like that, right? How can we help you present yourself in a better light to brokers? So it's changed over time. And so now we have a carrier product where they can log in and they can update their account and manage some of that information. And it's a really important part of our growth strategy, right? Is to help the carrier present themselves really well to a freight broker.
Right. Well, I think that's one of the most valuable pieces of what you guys are doing, is because carriers oftentimes, especially in the fraud conversation, and especially in the fraud conversation post 2020, they've largely felt left out of the conversation. Now, you and I have had some conversations about some carriers or some owner ops who have come to the BCS, who are part of our network, and we've facilitated some conversations about, hey, this is how carriers are viewing, whether it's the industry in general, whether it's over reliance on one data point inspections over another, or whether it's, hey, I'm trying to work with highway and I'm having challenges. How do we have those conversations? So it's been really good to watch that evolve over time.
Yeah. And look, we're always like, when we tell this all the time, like, we are not perfect. And we will over index on security. We will over index on transparency. And the other thing to understand is, like, at the end of the day, like, highway doesn't make a hiring decision. We don't make a hiring decision. The broker makes a hiring decision. So, we're enforcing standards that we presented to the broker as options, but the broker is enforcing those standards. An anecdotal story that I love is I go to the Reliance Insurance Conference every year. They have a Trucking Matters conference. And so there's a lot of fleets there. So it's more fleets than brokers. And not this last one, but last year I went and I spent a tremendous amount of time talking to small fleets that didn't understand highway and didn't understand why we asked them to do things they do. And they were not very happy with me at that time. Because highway was still kind of new. And there's like these 3 carriers or different fleets with their friends, right? And they kind of hang out together. And I see them coming up to me this year. This is just like a couple weeks ago. And I thought, oh no, here we go again. They're well, okay. Well, you found me. And it was completely different. And they said, hey man, like, the highway has been so helpful. This one time, like, somebody tried to impersonate us and you guys caught it and let us know, or somebody changed the FMCSA change. Like, they had many impersonation attempts. Because as the vectors have changed, you have to either buy an MC or impersonate a carrier. We make it harder for a new or young MC that's doing things to go steal freight. So the vectors moved to, like, I've got to impersonate somebody that's good. And so these same carriers came up and said 2 things. They said, one, all of them said, hey, you saved us from an impersonation event. And the second thing is they said, hey, when we actually cleaned up our stuff on highway, we got more business. We actually started getting more outreach from brokers that wanted to give us business. And that made me really happy. And especially since they were really angry with me the first time I met them.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And so talk to us about that. So obviously the landscape in fraud, let's call it pre-2020, fraud, double brokering, scamming, whatever we want to call it, all the scumbags, right? That landscape existed in, let's call it, environment A, pre-COVID. And then you had 2020 to, I don't know, 2023-ish. And it seemed like fraud and cargo theft and everything was just absolutely just out of freaking control. And it got really, really bad. And now, with what you guys are doing, with other companies are doing in the space, it seems to be the landscape on how fraudsters and scumbags are interacting or trying to interact with the marketplace is changing again. So how have you seen this develop over the life of highway and over the life of your product?
Yeah. So, early it was simpler, honestly. It was people operating the same stuff we've talked about, right? Like Dale Prax is great about talking about this. It was basic kind of like registration stuff. Guys have multiple MCs at the same address, right? They're using different phone numbers. And it was pretty easy for a carrier to hide, right? They use a VoIP number. They hold 20 MCs and decide which one they're going to do bad things with. It was fairly easy. And a lot of vendors have done work to uncover this, but we've kind of pushed the vector away from that. It's harder. And so what we're seeing is the sold MC. It's not really sold, Dan. We know that, right? It's like, meet me in a McDonald's parking lot and I'll give you $5,000 and you give me all your login information. That's what it is. It's not a legit business sale. It's the sold MC and the compromised inbox. So because of that, so most large freight brokers use highway. We see more onboards and carrier interaction than any platform. And so because it's very difficult to penetrate that broker's network via highway, they're trying to penetrate the broker's network differently. Either their own like private load board, right? If there's some security issues there, or
the broker's private load board, or
yeah. So if the broker has a private load board with a username and password, they'll try to go fish that credential because some of that we protect, right? We live as the identity and access management layer. Some of it we don't yet protect, right? We're moving into that space. Or the carrier's inbox. So they've moved away from trying to brute force into the broker as much as they used to. And they're trying to compromise the carrier's inbox so that they can just see the freight that's coming in. Right. So they'll fish the credential from the carrier. They'll get access to the inbox and they'll just sit there. And so they'll book a load, right? They'll book a load and delete the rate confirmation before the actual carrier sees it. Like they're literally working in the carrier's inbox. with the purpose of just gaining the information to go steal the freight. It's incredible. Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk, I mean, Michael Grace handles this for us, but it's a 41% increase in compromised inboxes since Q1.
And you're saying that's the main way in which you're seeing
Yep.
carriers getting taken advantage of.
That and the sold MC. The sold MC is like the silent threat. It takes a lot of work on our side to detect the patterns that suggest a sold MC. Because again, it's not a legitimate business change. So it's not like you go see it, in a filing somewhere.
Well, and the challenge part about that is there is a legitimate way to actually sell your MC as an asset, the legitimate way. So there's a mechanism to do that, but most people, like you say, who are buying and selling MCs and trying to defraud people are not going to take the effort to do things the legit legal way. But that's interesting because a lot of carriers I know, I was talking to a carrier last week. We're talking about how the BCS actually can be more relatable to carriers. And he said, stop sending a bunch of emails. And I said, why not? And he said, because I don't check my emails. I check my emails like once a day or twice a day. And my inbox is flooded. And so then it makes sense that scammers and thieves and double brokers and bad actors are trying to gain access through carriers' email inboxes when they don't check their inboxes very often.
Because a lot of small carriers, they're living in text channels or WhatsApp, or we've got a product called LoadLock. I think I've told you about it, Dan. And so we'll look at the nature of a carrier's bookings and load data relative to their equipment account and location. And so we'll see things, and our security team we've called a carrier before and said, hey, you're on this load for so and so. And you don't have a truck anywhere near there. What's going on? Either you pick this up, what's happening? And the carrier's like, I know what you're talking about. I'm not on that load. I didn't take that load. But so we got into their inbox and impersonated the carrier and deleted it all before anybody ever knew. And so bad actor had the information they needed and they were headed there to get it. And so we were able to tell the carrier, hey, I think your email credentials have been compromised because you're on this load in this broker system. They booked you on this load. So the broker thinks they're interacting with a legitimate email,
right?
Because the carrier got phished.
And if the carriers aren't monitoring their inbox as often as they probably should, or not investing in security for their emails, then that makes a lot of sense as to why that's now becoming a channel for that.
The way that we stop that is we gate it. We have a rate confirmation delivery product where the only way to access that is with your sign-in with highway credential, which is a 30-second. So a bad actor couldn't get it. They couldn't, even if they got in the email, even if we sent it, when they go click to view Raycon, we're going to catch them, we're going to stop them and issue an alert. So we now gate that rate confirmation where only a verified user can see the rate confirmation on behalf of the carrier.
Gotcha. Yeah. Well, it's so complicated. We talk about it with social media. I talk about it with my kids. There are so many doors into your life and windows into your life now, whether it's, TikTok, Instagram, email, whatever it might be. And so many things taking your attention away from the important things. It's very important to be undistractable as much as possible, especially as a business owner. What other, so I want to broaden the conversation a little bit while we have a little bit more time. What other challenges do you see as not only in the fraud space, but challenges that are affecting carriers the most right now in this market environment?
Yeah, I think there's two things. One is always with carriers, liquidity. Can I get paid? Can I get paid quickly? But that actually starts upstream with is the broker real? Right. So if you think about being a small motor carrier, bad actors impersonate brokers too. Right. Bad actors doctor rate confirmations as well. So, so a carrier really is in the situation of worrying about two things. Is the information I'm getting from a real broker? Because any bad actor can spoof an email and make something look like a large broker's rate confirmation, which is why we even tell carriers hey, if our customers are using Raycon delivery, it's coming through our channel. We saw it from their TMS, right? It's not an email. It's not something somebody attached to an email. And then the second thing is, and so if I do the right thing, can I get paid quickly? Now we're not in the payment space, right? But what we do desire to do is say, hey, like these real carriers that are doing real things that aren't that don't, you don't have a reason to worry about them. Can we connect a real broker with a real carrier and help payment companies like Triumph boost the liquidity of that carrier through their product like LoadPay, right? So hey, if I don't have anything to worry about, if I'm a great carrier, my ELD is connected, my documentation is we've got clear line of sight. They should be able to get paid really quickly. They should be able to take advances, reduce their dependency on factoring companies. So, they get to put more money in their pocket and they get to do it faster.
Yeah. Well, and that underscores, and I feel like a broken record by saying it underscores the value of relationships and actual partnerships with real people sitting across the table from each other. I have this conversation with every single, technology provider, every single broker and carrier I talk to is like, you have to get to know not only the companies that you're working with, you have to get to know the people at the companies who are going to help you advance your business alongside them. So you mentioned the payment space. Like it's so important for brokers and carriers to know, because payments, obviously, if you don't get paid, you don't have a business, right? And that's one of the biggest points frustration between brokers and carriers is, hey, where's my money, right? So, and you guys have done a lot in the last few years in developing partnerships across pretty much all aspects of the industry. So talk to us about how the value of partnerships has, again, helped not only navigate the fraud prevention conversation, but just helped in the overall elevation of your experience in the freight industry.
Yeah, I think it's two parts, right? So you talk about relationships, and when we talk about relationships, what we're really talking about is trust, right? So like you and I, like, we trust each other, right? We may not always agree, but we can come, and if we trust each other, we can say, hey, like, I trust that Dan has the best interest of his audience, motor carriers. I trust that he has that at heart, right? You trust that I'm doing my best to do it. I may not always do it right. We may create some unnecessary friction for carriers at times, but so you've lowered the barrier and said, okay, we can at least see eye to eye without playing this, can we trust each other game? And so a lot of friction lives when there's a low trust environment. So if you can just increase trust, a lot of that friction just naturally goes away because we don't have to ask so many questions. We can go faster. And so when it comes to partnerships, so one of the kind of product tenets we have is we want to reduce the total surface area of risk for our customers. So what does that mean? Well, we're reducing surface area of risk, which means we're pulling fraud and the losses associated with fraud out of the network. The flip side of that, when you reduce surface area of risk, is you now have a focus area. And so what happens is it unlocks value across the freight broker, right? And we do that technically different than any other vendor in data layer versus application layer. There's some things that we do that enable us to interact with partners differently. And so you take an agentic AI company, right? Whose job is maybe to answer the phone, right? And enable a human. Well, if we can tell that AI company whether this is a good actor or a bad actor, right? We've now, with our VoIP endpoint, protected the network. But if we can tell the AI company, hey, this is a good actor, and oh, by the way, this is something about that carrier's characteristics and how they work with that broker, that tech stack can now enable a better experience for the carrier in terms of the loads that they're able to move. You see what I'm saying? A carrier could conceivably call about one load, and the AI could see, based on what we know about that carrier, that there's actually other loads they can tell that carrier about. When you think about moving more freight per person in a broker, right? When you think about a broker's P&L, you have to help the carrier to do that because you have to give fewer carriers more loads. The things that improve a broker's operating margins actually help the carrier.
Yes.
And at a good brokerage, Dan, at a good brokerage.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we've gotten from specifically the carriers that come to the BCS is they come to me and they say, hey, we found our core customers, brokers, at whether it's the Fort Worth event or the Indy event or whatever it might be. And we are now not riding the line of profitability. We're not taking losses now because we have customers that give us regular freight. They give us regular freight above or at where we need to be to operate. And that level of trust between the broker and the carrier, the customer or the partner, is elevated. And you want to know what one of the cool things that you're able to do when you establish a high level of trust? You're able to give each other a little bit of grace in the day to day. And we've found conversations between brokers and carriers, especially the ones who have been doing business, through either our network or because of our network or our events for the last couple of years, is the conversation, the quality of conversation, and therefore the quality of resultant business is so much better than you find in the open marketplace because that trust is there.
Yeah, 100%. But the question is, like, how do you establish it when it's been broken? Like, how do you? I mean, there's a lot of technology vendors out there that have taken money and taken money and taken money and not done anything different until they were forced to. Didn't listen to their customers. And so, like, if you're a broker or a carrier, like, how do you know who you can trust? How do you know whose narrative you can trust? And so I think we're kind of moving to a world where nobody trusts anybody, and it's all in the results. Like, can you produce the outcome that the other party desires? Right. And I think carriers are getting wiser to that as well. Right. I think there does need to be a market turn, though. I mean, some of this, Dan, is just market dynamics.
And that's a fact. I mean, we've been in the doldrums of this market for, God, so long. And I'm hopeful that 2025 still has some kind of silver lining to it. But until then, I think one of the most encouraging pieces of the last probably 2 or 3 years, and humbly, I think BCS has been a large part of this, is the ability for these conversations to take place, whether it's over social media, whether it's over a cup of coffee. People now feel empowered across the carrier landscape, across the broker landscape, to have honest, transparent conversations with their partners, with their competitors. I was in Indianapolis at the most recent BCS, and I was listening in on a conversation. 2 brokers who I know are in the same revenue band, who are they play in the same space, just commiserating over challenges they're having, and they're giving each other pointers on how they've overcome similar challenges. The idea of a rising tide lifting all boats is not some kumbaya, BS statement. It's actually true. And hopefully, whether the market turns sooner or later, I hope that as we go along in this, everyone is enjoying their work environment just a little more every day by the fact that we're able to actually, have conversations that are of transparent and authentic value. So
I think what you're alluding to as well, the brokers that I talk to, right, that reside in our customer base, they all do want to compete, right? And they don't want to give away competitive information, but they want to engage in competition that's not based on somebody else suffering from fraud or theft, right? Or severe financial losses, right? They do want to maintain a competitive edge, right? And they want to build that with culture and technology and unique offerings around freight types or whatever their model is. But when you get senior leaders of a brokerage together to talk, like, no one wants the other one to win or lose over malicious activity.
Yeah, it cheapens the win if you win that way.
It allows the bad actor to stay in the marketplace and thrive. Right. So the only way to really eradicate and create a fair, right, or appropriate competitive environment is to create more. You're always going to arbitrage like imbalances in the market, but to have these wild disparities, right? No one benefits in that. No one benefits in that. Especially not the carrier, because the carrier suffers massive swings back and forth.
Right. Well, and the carrier bears the brunt of every decision made in the industry, and most of the decisions, almost all the decisions, end up on the driver's shoulders. And so when I hear conversations, I mean, have a lot of conversations with a lot of different drivers who come from a lot of different backgrounds. But one of the common threads in that conversation is they just feel put upon and just crapped on all the time. And so you have people who just, whether they get on social, they get on whatever, and they just start screaming at whoever will listen. We've had some interactions with some of those individuals, and I don't have to agree with the specific points that they make. What I can do though is I can say, hey, you know what? I hear you. And not only do I hear you, I'm going to give you a platform to speak and to tell your story. And hopefully the right people will listen to it.
Yeah, because it comes from somewhere. Even if it's ill-timed or ill-communicated, that's a feeling that comes from somewhere, right? They didn't just make that perception up. I mean, honestly, I was thinking about that today. I saw some social post of, man, I got the opportunity to sit down and talk to this guy about supply chain, blah, blah, blah. And I always find it interesting when people say supply chain and 3PL and logistics and whatever. Even this conversation, I feel a little uncomfortable because we're having this conversation about, drivers and someone out there is like driving the truck. Like somebody is away from their family. They can't find a parking place. They're having to take their 10-hour at the worst spot ever because it just happened. And we're sitting here commiserating in our comfortable offices. And the reality is like where it all ends is a guy sitting in line at the Port of Savannah in the stacks, just trying to move enough containers today so he can make a living. Right? The guy that's just trying to avoid detention because he's going to time out and not get his daily revenue because he's sitting at a shipper because he missed an appointment or because some broker okey-doked him and said it was an appointment, but it's first come, first serve. Like, you're absolutely right. All of this wonderful thing that we're talking about ends at the truck. And so the criticism I've had of freight tech is like, and I'm not saying we do it the best, but we're trying to do better. Show me how all of the billions of dollars that have gone into visibility and all this stuff, has it improved the life of the driver materially in the last 10 years?
Yeah.
I don't know that it has, Dan.
I don't know that it has either. And I think that would be a fascinating conversation to have, not just with you and I, but maybe bring some drivers in on that and really get some actionable feedback as to like how that has or has not changed.
And I don't know that the job's going to get any easier anytime soon. And there's things you can't change, but it would be really interesting to understand, like at the driver, because the fleet benefits from lower turnover. I mean, how much expense is involved in driver turnover, right? And managing
massive.
That safety, right? And like that's insurance companies look at the driver turnover. You now have insurers that are trying to not just schedule the auto, but schedule the driver.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think we're going to go toward autonomous, like the industry's headed that way, but you're still going to have humans in the equipment. And I think we have to be really, in the same way that there's this like existential conversation about AI and how AI affects our jobs. I think we still have to have conversations about the human and the equipment. And if the technology that we're developing somehow makes their life better.
Well, I tell you what, that's a whole other conversation in and of itself, and I would love to have you back on at some point in the next few weeks or couple months to unpack that, because that could be a fascinating conversation about how AI and everything is going to be changing everything from the driver to the tendering process. So
absolutely.
All right. Well, Mike, thank you very much, my friend. It's always great talking with you. Appreciate your time, and I will see you here in a few weeks.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for breaking it down with us on this episode of The Freight Break. By way of reminder, the Broker Carrier Summit in Orlando is only a few weeks away. And if you have not yet signed up, you do not want to miss it. Join us, www.brokercarriersummit.com/events. See you guys there.